King Zornthak's multiple arms tremble with rage as his daughter, Princess Zara, utters words that shake the foundations of the Gorn Empire. "Father, I will marry Edward Roberts, the human gladiator." The opulent throne room of the Gorn royal palace on Gornax Prime falls silent. King Zornthak, his iridescent scales reflecting the shocked faces of the court, towers over his daughter. Princess Zara stands defiantly, her sleek green scales gleaming and golden eyes fixed on her father. Beside her, bound in chains, Edward Roberts holds his head high. His muscular frame bears the scars of countless battles, a testament to his reputation as the Earthborn Destroyer. The human's presence in the throne room, typically reserved for Gorn nobility, sends ripples of unease through the gathered courtiers. King Zornthak's voice booms across the chamber. "You dare bring this slave before me as a suitor?" His words drip with disdain. "I summoned you to discuss matches with noble Gorn families, not to entertain the notion of polluting our royal bloodline with human filth." Princess Zara's resolve doesn't waver. Edward has proven his worth in the arena. His combat skills surpass those of any Gorn warrior. He is worthy of my hand and a place in our empire. The king's eyes narrow as he considers the implications of his daughter's request. The Gorn Empire, a vast interstellar civilization, has long subjugated humans, viewing them as nothing more than slaves and entertainment. Zara's proclamation threatens to upend centuries of established hierarchy. As tension mounts in the throne room, whispers spread like wildfire through the palace corridors. Gorn nobles and military leaders exchange furtive glances, sensing an opportunity in the princess's audacious move. Some see a chance to challenge the king's authority, while others fear the potential collapse of their carefully constructed social order. Edward stands silent, his eyes darting between Zara and the king. Despite his chains, an air of defiance surrounds him. The human's reputation for brutality in the arena has earned him both fear and admiration among the Gorn, and now he finds himself at the center of a political firestorm. In the depths of the palace, news of the confrontation reaches the slave quarters. Marcus Chen, a former Earth military officer, gathers a small group of trusted humans. "This could be our chance," he whispers urgently. "If Edward becomes royalty, we might finally have an ally in power." The fate of both species hangs in the balance as King Zornthak weighs his response. His decision could either cement the Gorn Empire's dominance or sow the seeds of its destruction. The king's gaze sweeps across the room, taking in the eager faces of the court, his defiant daughter, and the chained human who dares to reach for the stars. With each passing moment, the pressure builds. The air in the throne room grows thick with anticipation. King Zornthak knows that his next words will echo across the empire, potentially igniting a civil war or ushering in a new era of interspecies relations. As the king opens his mouth to speak, the entire Gorn Empire holds its breath, awaiting a verdict that will reshape the course of galactic history. King Zornthak's eyes flashed with a dangerous glint as he opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, his face contorted with fury. "Guards!" he roared, his multiple arms gesticulating wildly. "Seize this human filth and return him to the gladiatorial pens immediately." The Gorn guards, their scales gleaming in the throne room's light, moved swiftly to obey their king's command. As they approached Edward, the human's muscles tensed, his battle-honed instincts kicking in. In a blur of motion, Edward twisted his body, using the weight of his chains to his advantage. He swung the heavy links, catching the first guard off guard and sending him sprawling. The second guard lunged forward, but Edward ducked under his grasp, using the momentum to drive his shoulder into the Gorn's midsection. The throne room erupted into chaos. Courtiers gasped and scrambled back, their elegant robes rustling as they pressed against the walls. Princess Zara's eyes widened in a mix of admiration and horror as she watched Edward's display of combat prowess. Despite his initial success, Edward found himself quickly overwhelmed. More guards poured into the room, their weapons raised. With a final, desperate look at Zara, Edward was subdued, his arms wrenched behind his back. "Father, please!" Zara cried out, her voice cutting through the commotion. She rushed forward only to be held back by two guards. You can't do this. Edward has proven his worth countless times in the arena. He deserves... Silence! King Zornthak bellowed, rising from his throne. His massive frame seemed to fill the entire room as he loomed over his daughter. You dare to challenge my authority? To suggest that this human could ever be worthy of our royal bloodline? The king's gaze swept across the room, taking in the shocked faces of his court. His voice lowered to a dangerous growl. I will not allow our empire to be tainted by human blood. This discussion is over. With a wave of his hand, King Zornthak signaled the guards to remove Edward. The human gladiator was dragged from the throne room, his feet scraping against the polished floor. As the door slammed shut behind him, Princess Zara's anguished cry echoed through the chamber. In the aftermath of the confrontation, King Zornthak turned to his most trusted advisor, General Krasnak. The general's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on his monarch. Krasnak, the king said, his voice low and menacing. I want you to investigate this infatuation my daughter has developed. Find out how a human slave managed to turn her head. Leave no stone unturned. General Krasnak bowed deeply, his cybernetic implants gleaming. As you command, Your Majesty, I will begin the investigation immediately. As the general left to carry out his orders, King Zornthak turned his attention back to Princess Zara. You will be confined to your chambers until further notice. Guards, escort the princess to her rooms and double the security detail. Zara struggled against the guards' grip as they led her away, her golden eyes flashing with defiance. This isn't over, father, she hissed. You can't keep us apart forever. Meanwhile, deep in the bowels of the palace, Edward was thrown unceremoniously into a high-security cell in the gladiatorial pens. The cell door clanged shut behind him, the sound echoing off the cold stone walls. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Edward became aware of another presence in the cell. A lean, battle-scarred human stepped out of the shadows, his eyes sharp and assessing. So, you're the one they call the Earthborn Destroyer, the man said, his voice low and gravelly. I'm Marcus Chen, former Earth military, and I think you might be just the man we need. Edward eyed Marcus warily. Need for what? A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. For the revolution we're about to start. How'd you like to bring the entire Gorn Empire to its knees? As Edward considered Marcus's words, the wheels of change were already in motion throughout the palace. In the opulent chambers of the nobility, Lord Vexthor, a Gorn aristocrat with ambition to match his cunning, gathered a group of like-minded nobles. My friends, Vexthor said, his voice silky smooth, King Zornthak's failure to control his own daughter is a clear sign of weakness. The time has come for new leadership that will ensure the purity and strength of our great empire. Outside the palace walls, the news of Princess Zara's proclamation spread like wildfire through the streets of Gornak's prime. In the bustling marketplaces and shadowy alleyways, Gorn citizens whispered and argued about the implications of a human potentially joining the royal family. In a dimly lit temple on the outskirts of the capital, High Priest Zalgoth addressed a group of fervent Gorn supremacists. His eyes blazed with fanatical intensity as he spoke. Brothers and sisters, our very way of life is under threat. We must take action to purge this human influence from our society, starting with those who would pollute our royal bloodline. As night fell over Gornak's prime, tensions simmered beneath the surface of the seemingly peaceful city. In the palace, in the gladiatorial pens, in noble houses and common dwellings alike, plans were being laid and alliances formed. The Gorn Empire stood on the brink of a change that would shake it to its very foundations. And at the center of it all, a human gladiator and a Gorn princess dared to dream of a future that defied the boundaries of their society. The stage was set for a conflict that would determine not just their fate, but the fate of two species and an entire empire. As night descended upon Gornak's prime, the simmering tensions erupted into chaos. Alarms blared throughout the palace, their shrill cries echoing off the ornate walls. Princess Zara, confined to her chambers, saw her opportunity. With a deep breath, she steeled herself for what was to come. The princess moved swiftly, her lithe form slipping past the distracted guards. Years of exploring the palace as a child had taught her every secret passage and hidden alcove. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors with practiced ease, her heart pounding in sync with the distant sounds of conflict. Meanwhile, deep in the gladiatorial pens, Edward and Marcus sprang into action. The cell door, left unlocked in the confusion, swung open with a creak. Edward turned to Marcus, his eyes glinting with dedication. "Let's move," he said, his voice low and steady. The two men led a group of human slaves through the dimly lit corridors of the lower levels. The air was thick with tension as they encountered their first obstacle, a patrol of Gorn guards. Edward reacted instinctively. He lunged forward, using his gladiatorial skills to disarm the first guard. The others followed suit, their years of pent-up frustration fueling their assault. The skirmish was brief but intense, ending with the guards unconscious and the humans armed with their weapons. As they pressed on, the palace around them descended further into bedlam. King Zornthak's voice boomed over the intercom system, his usual composure cracking under the strain. "Attention all personnel. Implement emergency protocols immediately. Activate all defense systems." The effect was instantaneous. Force fields sprang to life, cutting off entire sections of the palace. Sleek metallic drones emerged from hidden compartments, their sensors scanning for unauthorized movement. Edward and Marcus exchanged grim looks. "This complicates things," Marcus muttered, eyeing a drone as it zipped past their hiding spot. Their progress slowed as they navigated the new obstacles. Each step forward was hard-won, requiring careful timing and quick thinking to avoid detection. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a squad of Gorn soldiers. Edward raised his weapon, ready for another fight, but to his surprise, the lead soldier raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "Wait!" the soldier called out, her voice distinctly female. "We're not here to fight you." Edward hesitated, his combat-honed instincts screaming caution. The Gorn soldier removed her helmet, revealing a young, determined face. "I'm Lieutenant Kirazol," she said. "My team and we want to help. We've seen the injustice, the cruelty. It's time for a change." Marcus stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Why should we trust you?" Kirazol's reply was cut short by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. "No time to explain," she hissed. "Follow me if you want to live." With no other choice, Edward and Marcus led their group after Kirazol and her soldiers. The unlikely allies moved swiftly through the palace, Kirazol's inside knowledge proving invaluable in avoiding patrols and navigating the security systems. As they ascended to the upper levels, a commotion ahead caught their attention. The sound of a struggle, punctuated by a familiar voice, made Edward's heart race. "Let go of me!" Princess Zara's voice rang out, filled with defiance. Edward surged forward, rounding the corner to find Zara surrounded by a group of elite Gorn guards. Without hesitation, he charged into the fray. Zara's eyes widened in recognition. "Edward!" Using her momentary distraction, Zara elbowed her captor and broke free. She turned to the guards, drawing herself up to her full height. "As your princess, I command you to stand down." The guards hesitated, centuries of ingrained obedience warring with their orders. It was all the opening Edward and Marcus needed. They struck swiftly, disarming and subduing the confused guards. In the aftermath, Edward and Zara's eyes met. Words failed them as they took in each other's presence, the reality of their reunion sinking in. But their moment was short-lived. A bone-chilling screech of metal on metal filled the air. General Krasnak's voice, amplified and distorted, echoed through the corridors. "Find them! Bring me the princess and the human scum!" The sound of heavy rhythmic footsteps grew closer. Marcus grabbed Edward's shoulder. "We need to move. Now." Kirazol nodded in agreement. "The hangar. It's our best chance." As they ran, Marcus turned to Edward and Zara. "There's something you need to know," he said between breaths. "Before I was captured, I was part of a resistance movement. We have a hidden base on one of Gornax Prime's moons. If we can get to a ship, we have a safe haven." The group pushed on, their numbers now a mix of humans, sympathetic Gorn, and the determined princess. They fought their way through malfunctioning security systems, and loyalist forces, each step bringing them closer to potential freedom. As they approached the hangar, a chilling voice stopped them in their tracks. High Priest Zalgoth stood before them, flanked by his fanatical followers. In his hands, he held an ancient Gorn weapon, its surface glowing with otherworldly energy. "Abominations!" Zalgoth spat, his eyes burning with hatred. "You will not defile our sacred empire." Edward stepped forward, his muscles tensing for the fight to come. The fate of their escape, and perhaps the future of human-Gorn relations, hung in the balance as he faced off against the enraged priest. The hangar, once a place of routine departures and arrivals, was about to become a battleground. The air crackled with tension as both sides prepared for a confrontation that would shape the course of history on Gornax Prime. The tension in the air was palpable as Edward faced off against High Priest Zalgoth, the ancient Gorn weapon humming with otherworldly energy in the priest's gnarled hands. Edward's muscles coiled, ready to spring into action. His eyes darted around, taking in the layout of the hangar, looking for any advantage he could use. Zalgoth's followers formed a semicircle behind their leader, their faces twisted with hatred and disgust. "You will not leave this place alive, human filth!" Zalgoth snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. Edward didn't respond. Instead, he lunged forward, his gladiatorial instincts taking over. Zalgoth fired the weapon, unleashing a blast of searing energy. Edward rolled to the side, feeling the heat of the beam as it passed inches from his head. The hangar erupted into chaos. Princess Zara, Marcus, and the others engaged Zalgoth's followers, the sound of blaster fire and hand-to-hand combat filling the air. Lieutenant Kirazal and her Gorn sympathizers fought alongside the humans, their unlikely alliance born of desperation and a shared desire for change. Edward weaved and dodged, his agility honed by years in the arena serving him well against Zalgoth's relentless assault. The priest's weapon left scorch marks on the hangar floor and walls, each near miss a reminder of the deadly stakes of their duel. "Stand still and accept your fate," Zalgoth roared, frustration evident in his voice. Edward saw his opening. As Zalgoth raised the weapon for another blast, Edward closed the distance between them. He feinted left, then struck right, his hand connecting with Zalgoth's wrist. The ancient weapon clattered to the floor, skidding across the smooth surface. Princess Zara, having just incapacitated a Gorn supremacist, spotted the weapon. She dived for it, her hand closing around its ornate handle. As she stood, the weapon began to glow brighter, responding to her royal DNA. "No!" Zalgoth cried out, his eyes wide with disbelief. Zara leveled the weapon at the High Priest and his remaining followers. "It's over, Zalgoth. Stand down." The tables turned, Zalgoth and his devotees retreated, disappearing into the maze of corridors beyond the hangar. Edward rushed to Zara's side, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "We need to move," Marcus called out, already heading towards a large transport ship docked nearby. "It won't be long before reinforcements arrive." The group hurried aboard the ship, Edward and Zara taking the pilot seats, while Marcus and Kirazal manned the weapon systems. The engines roared to life, the ship shuddering as it prepared for takeoff. Suddenly, the hangar doors burst open. General Krasnak strode in, his cybernetic eye glowing an ominous red. Behind him, a squad of heavily armed and augmented Gorn warriors filed in, their weapons trained on the transport ship. "Open fire!" Krasnak bellowed, his voice amplified by his cybernetic enhancements. Energy bolts peppered the ship's hull as Edward wrestled with the controls. The transport lurched forward, scraping against the hangar floor as it gained speed. Marcus and Kirazal returned fire, their shots keeping Krasnak's forces at bay. "Edward, we're not going to clear the hangar doors," Zara shouted over the din of battle. Gritting his teeth, Edward pushed the throttle to maximum. "We'll make it. Trust me." The ship screamed towards the hangar exit, energy bolts still raining down around them. At the last second, Edward pulled up, the bottom of the ship scraping against the edge of the hangar doors as they burst into open air. But their troubles were just the beginning. As they broke through Gornax Prime's atmosphere, the ship's systems blared warnings. "We've taken heavy damage," Zara reported, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Shields are down to 30%, and we've lost our starboard engine." Edward's hands tightened on the controls as he fought to keep the ship stable. "Can we make it to the jump point?" Before Zara could answer, a new threat appeared on their sensors. A swarm of automated defense satellites, activated by King Zornthak himself, closed in on their position. Streams of high-energy plasma bolts streaked past the view screen, some finding their mark on the already damaged hull. "Evasive maneuvers," Marcus yelled from the weapons station. Edward complied, sending the ship into a series of wild spins and dives. His experience in the gladiatorial arena translated surprisingly well to piloting, his instincts allowing him to anticipate and avoid the incoming fire. Zara worked furiously at her station, rerouting power and managing the ship's failing systems. "Edward, I've managed to boost power to the engines, but our shields are critical. We can't take much more of this." In the ship's hold, the human slaves and sympathetic Gorn worked together to repair what they could, passing tools and shouting instructions to each other in a mixture of human and Gorn languages. As they approached the jump point, a new signal appeared on their communications array. A sleek, state-of-the-art Gorn battlecruiser decloaked off their starboard bow. "Unknown transport, this is Captain Lyra Vexthor of the Gorn battlecruiser Starfire," a female voice crackled over the comm. "We're here to assist. Prepare to come under our shield protection." Edward and Zara exchanged surprised glances. "Can we trust her?" Edward asked. Zara's brow furrowed in concentration. "Lyra Vexthor. She's Lord Vexthor's daughter. I've heard rumors that she disagrees with her father's politics. It might be our only chance." With the defense satellites closing in and their shields on the verge of collapse, Edward made his decision. He adjusted their course, bringing them alongside the Starfire. The larger ship's shields extended, enveloping the damaged transport and protecting it from the barrage of plasma bolts. Under the Starfire's protection, they finally reached the jump point, but as Edward prepared to activate the jump drive, a new alarm blared. "The navigation system is damaged," Zara announced, her voice tight with tension. "If we jump now, we could end up anywhere in the galaxy." Edward's mind raced. Stay in Gorn space and face certain capture or destruction, or risk a blind jump into the unknown. The lives of everyone aboard, human and Gorn alike, hung on his decision. As he grappled with the choice, the comm system crackled to life once more. King Zornthak's voice, filled with rage and desperation, echoed through the bridge. "This is your last warning. Return my daughter and surrender the human rebels, or face the consequences. I have activated our ultimate weapon, capable of destroying entire worlds. The human colonies will be the first to feel its power if you do not comply." The threat hung in the air, adding new weight to Edward's decision. With the fate of 2 species in his hands, he reached for the jump drive controls. His choice made. Edward took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the jump drive controls. The lives of everyone aboard, human and Gorn alike, hung in the balance. "We're jumping," he announced, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Zara's eyes widened. "Edward, are you sure? We could end up anywhere." "Anywhere is better than here," he replied, meeting her gaze. "We stay, we die. We jump, we have a chance." Without further hesitation, Edward activated the jump drive. The ship shuddered violently, the damaged systems straining under the stress. Alarms blared as the view screen filled with the swirling chaos of jump space. Suddenly, the ship lurched, throwing everyone off balance. The bridge erupted in a shower of sparks as consoles overloaded. Edward clung to the controls, fighting to keep the ship stable as they hurtled through the unpredictable currents of jump space. With a final, bone-jarring jolt, they emerged into real space. The view screen cleared, revealing an unfamiliar star system. Before anyone could celebrate their escape, new alarms sounded. "We've lost engine control," Zara shouted, her fingers flying over her console. "We're caught in the planet's gravity well." Edward gritted his teeth, wrestling with the unresponsive controls as the ship plummeted towards the surface of an alien world. The hull groaned under the strain of atmospheric entry, the damaged shields flickering weakly against the heat of re-entry. "Brace for impact!" Edward yelled as the ground rushed up to meet them. The ship slammed into the planet's surface, skidding across a lush jungle landscape. Trees snapped like twigs as the transport carved a long furrow through the dense vegetation. Finally, with a resounding crash, it came to a stop. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured coolant lines and the crackle of small fires. Edward groaned, pushing himself up from the floor where he'd been thrown. He looked around, assessing the damage and checking on the others. "Everyone all right?" he called out, his voice hoarse. Zara emerged from behind a damaged console, a small cut on her forehead but otherwise unharmed. "I'm okay," she said, moving to help Marcus, who was pinned under a fallen beam. As the smoke cleared, Edward and Zara organized the survivors. Humans and Gorn alike worked together to extinguish fires and free those trapped in the wreckage. Lieutenant Kirazal, her uniform torn and bloodied, approached Edward with a makeshift data pad. "I've done a preliminary assessment," she reported. "The ship is beyond repair, but we've managed to salvage some emergency supplies and communication equipment." Edward nodded, taking in the information. "Good work. Let's get everyone out and establish a perimeter. We need to secure our position before nightfall." As they exited the wreckage, the survivors found themselves in a vibrant alien jungle. Massive trees with iridescent leaves towered above them, their branches intertwining to form a dense canopy. Strange, bird-like creatures with multiple wings flitted between the trees, their calls echoing through the air. "The atmosphere is breathable," Marcus announced, checking a handheld scanner. "Gravity is slightly lower than Gornax Prime or Earth Standard, but within tolerable limits." Edward surveyed the crash site, his mind already formulating a plan. "All right, we need to set up a base camp. Zara, can you organize teams for foraging and exploration? Marcus, I want you to work on getting our communications up and running. Kirazal, you're in charge of security." As the group dispersed to their tasks, Edward felt a presence behind him. He turned to find Zara standing there, her eyes reflecting the strange, purple-tinged light filtering through the alien foliage. "Edward," she said softly, "what you did back there, it was incredibly brave and incredibly reckless." He met her gaze, feeling the weight of their shared ordeal. "I couldn't let them take you back. Any of you." Zara stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. The contact sent a spark through Edward, reminding him of the unspoken connection that had been growing between them. Their moment was interrupted by a startled shout from the edge of the clearing. Edward and Zara rushed over, pushing through the gathered crowd to see what had caused the commotion. Standing at the tree line was a group of alien beings unlike anything they had ever seen. Humanoid in shape, they stood slightly taller than the average human, with slender, elongated limbs. Their skin seemed to shimmer and pulse with bioluminescent patterns, casting a soft glow in the dimming light of the alien world. The aliens regarded the crash survivors with large, multifaceted eyes that reflected the jungle around them. They made no aggressive moves, but their presence sent a ripple of unease through the group. Edward stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. As he did so, he felt a strange pressure in his mind, as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate without words. "They're telepathic," Zara whispered, her voice filled with awe. "I can feel them, trying to understand us." The lead alien tilted its head, the patterns on its skin shifting in complex, mesmerizing ways. Slowly, it extended a long-fingered hand towards Edward. As the human and alien leaders reached out to one another, the jungle around them seemed to hold its breath. This moment of first contact would shape the fate of the stranded survivors and potentially change the course of galactic history. But even as Edward's fingers neared those of the alien, a distant rumble drew everyone's attention skyward. Through a break in the canopy, they could see a massive shape descending through the atmosphere, the unmistakable silhouette of a Gorn battlecruiser. The peaceful moment shattered as the alien beings retreated into the jungle, their skin flashing with patterns that Edward could only interpret as alarm. The crash survivors looked to him and Zara, fear and uncertainty plain on their faces. Edward's mind raced. The arrival of the battlecruiser could mean rescue, or it could bring the conflict they had so narrowly escaped right to this untouched world. As the ship drew closer, he knew they had precious little time to decide their next move. Move. As the massive ship loomed closer, Edward made a split-second decision. "Everyone into the jungle!" he shouted, gesturing urgently towards the dense foliage where the alien beings had disappeared. "We need to find cover." The group scrambled to gather what supplies they could carry and plunged into the alien forest. The strange bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow around them as they pushed through the undergrowth, the distant rumble of the approaching battlecruiser growing louder with each passing moment. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, Edward noticed the alien beings moving alongside them, their shimmering forms blending seamlessly with the surrounding vegetation. Despite the language barrier, he sensed they were guiding the group to safety. Suddenly, they emerged into a clearing dominated by a massive pyramid-like structure. Its surface was covered in intricate, glowing patterns that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. At its base stood a group of the tall, luminescent aliens, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the new arrivals. "What is this place?" Zara whispered, her voice filled with awe. Before Edward could respond, he felt that familiar pressure in his mind intensify. Images and sensations flooded his consciousness. The structure was an ancient artifact, a relic of a long-lost civilization that had once spanned the galaxy. The aliens, the Xel'Naga, his mind supplied, were its guardians. "They're trying to tell us something," Edward said, his voice strained as he attempted to interpret the alien thoughts. "This artifact, it's powerful. They think it might be our only chance." Zara stepped forward, her eyes locked on the pulsing structure. "We need to activate it," she said with sudden certainty. "Whatever it does, it has to be better than being captured or killed." Edward hesitated, weighing the risks. The artifact was an unknown quantity, potentially dangerous. But as the sound of the battlecruiser grew even louder, he realized they were out of options. "All right," he nodded. "How do we do this?" The Xel'Naga moved forward, forming a circle around Edward and Zara. Their skin patterns shifted rapidly, and Edward felt the psychic pressure increase. He reached out and took Zara's hand, partly for reassurance, partly out of instinct. As their fingers intertwined, the artifact pulsed brightly. Edward and Zara gasped in unison as they felt their minds stretch, connecting not only to each other, but to the vast, alien consciousness of the Xel'Naga. The world around them seemed to fade away as they were engulfed in a torrent of alien memories and knowledge. Edward saw glimpses of ancient star-spanning empires, cosmic wars, and technologies beyond his wildest imagination. Beside him, he could feel Zara's presence, her thoughts and emotions intertwining with his own. With a final surge of energy, the artifact activated. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from its peak, spreading outward in a visible wave that washed over the planet's surface. The stranded survivors watched in awe as dormant structures began to rise from the jungle floor, their forms sleek and otherworldly. As the energy wave dissipated, Edward and Zara stumbled, their mental connection to the Xel'Naga fading but not disappearing entirely. They looked at each other, a new understanding passing between them. "I can still feel you," Zara said softly, her eyes wide with wonder. Edward nodded, equally amazed. "I know. It's like we're connected somehow." Their moment of realization was interrupted by Marcus, who came running towards them with a handheld device. "Edward, Zara, you need to see this." The screen showed multiple signals converging on their location from various directions. Some were identified as human resistance ships, others as Gorn vessels from different factions. "The artifact must have amplified our distress signal," Zara said, her brow furrowing with concern. "We've just announced our presence to the entire sector." Edward turned to the Xel'Naga, their alien features unreadable, but their thoughts clear in his mind. "They're offering to help," he translated for the others. "They can use their psychic abilities to temporarily disable any ships that enter the atmosphere. It could buy us time to negotiate." Lieutenant Kirazal stepped forward, her posture tense. "We should use these new structures to our advantage," she suggested. "Some of them appear to house advanced weaponry and shields. We could fortify our position." As the group debated their next move, Edward felt a gentle pressure in his mind, an idea from the Xel'Naga. He turned to Zara, seeing in her eyes that she had received the same message. "The artifact network," they said in unison. Edward continued, "We could use it to broadcast a message of peace across the galaxy. It might be our only chance to prevent a war. Zara nodded, her expression determined. We need to project a holographic image to all the approaching ships. If we can open a dialogue, we might be able to defuse this situation before it escalates. As the first ships began to breach the planet's atmosphere, Edward and Zara faced each other, their hands clasped tightly. The fate of not just their group, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. With a shared nod of perseverance, they turned back to the artifact, ready to make their stand. The Xel'Naga gathered around them, their alien minds joining with the human and Gorn consciousness. As the power of the artifact surged once more, Edward and Zara prepared to send their message of peace to the stars, hoping against hope that it would be enough to prevent the looming conflict. As the artifact's energy coursed through them, Edward and Zara exchanged a determined look. They knew what they had to do. We need to broadcast a message, Edward said, his voice resonating with newfound clarity, to all the ships approaching this planet. Zara nodded, her mind already aligning with his. We'll use the artifact's power to project a holographic image. It's our best chance to prevent a war. As they focused their thoughts, the artifact responded, its pulsing energy intensifying. Suddenly, a beam of light shot upward from the pyramid's apex, piercing through the dense canopy and into the sky above. In the command centers of every approaching vessel, holographic images of Edward and Zara materialized simultaneously. The human gladiator and Gorn princess stood side by side, their appearance causing a ripple of shock and confusion among the various factions. On board his battle station, King Zornthak's eyes widened in disbelief. "Zara?" he whispered, his daughter's unexpected survival momentarily overriding his anger. In the lead ship of the human resistance fleet, Admiral Sarah Chen leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Is that Marcus's friend?" Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, Edward and Zara began to speak, their voices echoing in perfect unison across the communications channels. "People of Earth and Gornax Prime," they said, their words carried by the artifact's power. "We stand before you as living proof that our species can coexist in peace." As they spoke, the Xel'Naga's telepathic abilities created a shimmering barrier around the planet, preventing any ships from breaching the atmosphere. The display of advanced alien technology further captured the attention of the approaching fleets. Edward and Zara continued their message, recounting their shared experiences and the potential for cooperation between humans and Gorn. They revealed the existence of the ancient artifacts and warned of the dangers that awaited if the conflict continued. "We have discovered something greater than our individual struggles," Zara said, her voice strong and clear. "A legacy left by an ancient civilization that spans the galaxy." Edward added, "This technology has the power to transform our worlds, but only if we choose to work together. The path of war will lead only to mutual destruction." As their words resonated across the fleets, Captain Lyra Vexthor made a decision. Breaking radio silence, she opened a channel to all ships in the vicinity. "As a captain in Lord Vexthor's fleet, I stand with Edward and Princess Zara," she declared. "Their vision of peace is our best hope for a better future." Her bold move inspired others. Several ship captains from both Gorn factions voiced their support, creating a ripple effect throughout the assembled fleets. On Gornax Prime, the public broadcast of Zara's message ignited widespread civil unrest. Gorn citizens, long fed propaganda about human inferiority, began to question their deeply held beliefs. The streets filled with protesters demanding an end to the conflict. In orbit, a new player entered the scene. The United Earth Government fleet arrived, led by the diplomatic vessel Harmony. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned expert in interspecies relations, assessed the situation with keen interest. "This is an unprecedented opportunity," she said to her staff. "We must seize this moment for peace." She opened a channel to the planet's surface. "Edward, Princess Zara, this is Dr. Elena Rodriguez of the UEG. We request permission to land and begin negotiations." Back on the planet, Edward and Zara felt a surge of hope. They looked to Marcus and Lieutenant Kirazal, who nodded in agreement. "Permission granted, Dr. Rodriguez," Edward replied. We'll prepare a landing site using one of the alien structures as neutral ground. As they began preparations for the incoming diplomatic teams, a concerning development unfolded in orbit. A group of Gorn warships broke formation, their engines flaring as they attempted to push through the Xel'Naga's barrier. "We're receiving a transmission," Marcus called out, his face grim as he listened to the message. "It's High Priest Zalgoth. He's declared himself the leader of a Gorn supremacist faction. They're vowing to stop the negotiations at any cost." Edward and Zara exchanged worried glances. The path to peace was fraught with new dangers, but they were determined to see it through. As the diplomatic ships began their descent through the shimmering barrier, Edward turned to Zara, taking her hand in his. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "we face it together." Zara squeezed his hand, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the strange, alien light around them. "Together," she agreed. The ground trembled beneath their feet as another massive structure began to rise from the jungle floor, its purpose yet unknown. As night fell on this alien world, the stage was set for a negotiation that would shape the future of 3 species and potentially the entire galaxy. As the first diplomatic ships began their descent through the shimmering barrier, Edward and Zara turned their attention to the logistics of hosting this unprecedented summit. The newly emerged amphitheater-like structure served as the perfect venue for the talks. Its alien architecture blended seamlessly with the surrounding jungle, its walls pulsing with the same ethereal energy as the pyramid. Edward and Zara, along with Marcus and Lieutenant Kirazal, worked tirelessly to prepare the space, setting up makeshift seating and communication systems. As the representatives from the various factions arrived, the air crackled with tension. Humans and Gorn eyed each other warily, centuries of hostility evident in their body language. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a tall woman with sharp features and an air of authority, took charge immediately. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice carrying across the amphitheater. "We stand at a crossroads of history. Let us seize this opportunity for peace." King Zornthak's holographic image flickered into existence, his massive form towering over the assembly. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the gathering, lingering on his daughter. "I am here to listen," he rumbled. "But make no mistake, the interests of the Gorn Empire remain paramount." Lord Vexthor, present in person, stepped forward. "As do the interests of the new regime," he added, his voice smooth. "But perhaps those interests align more closely with peace than we previously thought." As Dr. Rodriguez began outlining her framework for the talks, Edward and Zara moved among the delegates, offering words of encouragement and bridging cultural gaps. Their unique bond served as a living example of human-Gorn cooperation. "You see," Zara said to a group of skeptical Gorn officers, "humans are not the enemy we were led to believe. They are capable of great courage and compassion." Edward, meanwhile, shared stories of Gorn culture with the human resistance fighters. "Their society is complex, with a rich history and traditions we've never understood," he explained. "There's so much we can learn from each other." As the talks progressed, a sense of cautious optimism began to grow. Dr. Rodriguez's proposals for addressing grievances and establishing trade agreements were met with thoughtful consideration from both sides. The idea of a joint task force to study the alien technology sparked particular interest. However, the fragile peace was shattered in an instant. A series of explosions rocked the perimeter of the compound, sending delegates scrambling for cover. Through the chaos, Edward caught sight of a group of heavily armed Gorn warriors storming the amphitheater. "It's Zalgoth!" Zara shouted, recognizing the distinctive armor of the High Priest. "He's launched an attack!" Edward's gladiatorial instincts kicked in immediately. He vaulted over a row of seats, snatching up a fallen weapon. "Defenders to me!" he called out. "Form a perimeter around the diplomats." A mixed group of humans and Gorn rallied to his call. Marcus and Kirazal took up flanking positions, their contrasting fighting styles complementing each other perfectly. Zara, her ancient Gorn weapon humming with power, provided covering fire from an elevated position. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Zalgoth's forces, though outnumbered, fought with fanatical zeal. Edward found himself locked in combat with a massive Gorn warrior, their hand-to-hand struggle a blur of strikes and counters. Suddenly, Edward felt a strange sensation in his mind. The Xelnuga were reaching out, their telepathic abilities linking the defenders. In an instant, he could sense the positions and intentions of his allies, allowing for unprecedented coordination. "Push them back," Edward called out, his voice carrying a new authority. "Don't let them near the diplomats." The tide of battle turned. The linked defenders moved with uncanny precision, anticipating and countering each of Zalgoth's moves. Slowly but surely, they forced the attackers back towards the edge of the compound. Zalgoth, realizing his direct assault had failed, snarled in frustration. "This isn't over," he roared, before retreating with his remaining forces towards a nearby alien structure. As the dust settled, Edward and Zara regrouped with Marcus, Kirazol, and the newly arrived Captain Lyra Vexthor. "We can't let him escape," Zara said urgently. "Who knows what damage he could do with access to this technology?" Edward nodded grimly. "Agreed. We need to go after him." He turned to the others. "Are you with us?" Without hesitation, they all nodded. The small team set off in pursuit of Zalgoth, following the trail of destruction he left in his wake. As they approached the alien structure, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. "What's happening?" Marcus called out, struggling to maintain his balance. Kirazol's eyes widened as she pointed to the sky. "Look!" Strange, pulsing lights filled the air above them, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The alien structure before them hummed with increasing power, its surface crawling with glowing symbols. "Whatever Zalgoth is doing in there," Edward said, his voice tight with urgency, "we need to stop him. Now!" They plunged into the structure, its corridors twisting and turning in ways that defied normal geometry. As they delved deeper, they encountered scattered groups of Zalgoth's followers, each confrontation more desperate than the last. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber that seemed to stretch impossibly far in all directions. At its center stood Zalgoth, his hands dancing over a complex array of holographic controls. "You're too late," the high priest cackled, his eyes wild with fanatical glee. "This planet's defenses will purge all non-Gorn life from its surface." Edward stepped forward, his body tensed for action. "We won't let that happen," he declared, his voice steady despite the enormity of the threat. As Zalgoth turned to face them, the chamber around them came alive with pulsing energy and activating machinery. The final confrontation was about to begin, with the fate of not just the peace talks, but potentially the entire galaxy hanging in the balance. Balance. The fate of not just the peace talks, but potentially the entire galaxy hung in the balance as Edward lunged towards Zalgoth, their bodies colliding with bone-jarring force. The two combatants grappled fiercely, each seeking to gain the upper hand. Edward's gladiatorial training served him well as he deflected Zalgoth's powerful strikes, countering with quick jabs and swift footwork. The High Priest's fanatical strength, however, made him a formidable opponent. As they fought, the alien facility around them pulsed with increasing energy. Holographic interfaces flickered to life, displaying complex patterns that shifted and changed with dizzying speed. The air crackled with an otherworldly charge, raising the hair on Edward's arms. Princess Zara, Marcus, Kirazol, and Captain Lyra Vexthor spread out across the chamber, their hands hovering over various control panels as they attempted to decipher the alien technology. "We need to shut this down," Zara shouted over the rising hum of machinery. Her multifaceted eyes darted between the controls and the ongoing fight. "If Zalgoth succeeds in activating the defense system, it could wipe out all non-Gorn life on the planet." Marcus gritted his teeth as he input a series of commands. "It's not responding. The system keeps cycling through different interfaces." Kirazol's antennae twitched as she studied a pulsing holographic display. "There's a pattern here, but it's beyond anything I've ever seen. It's as if the system is evolving." Suddenly, the chamber filled with a blinding light. Edward and Zalgoth paused in their struggle, shielding their eyes. As the light dimmed, a massive holographic figure materialized in the center of the room. Its form was fluid, shifting between various alien shapes before settling on a vaguely humanoid appearance. "I am the Guardian," the figure announced, its voice resonating through the chamber. "For millennia, I have waited for this moment. You have passed the final test set by my creators. Edward, still locked in a hold with Zalgoth, blinked in confusion. Test? What test? The Guardian's form shimmered as it replied, The test of cooperation. My creators believed that true advancement could only come when multiple species work together in harmony. Your presence here, humans and Gorn united, has fulfilled their criteria. As the Guardian spoke, Edward felt the fight drain out of Zalgoth. The High Priest's eyes widened in a mixture of awe and disbelief. The alien AI continued, As a reward for your achievement, I offer you access to the defense systems of this planet. However, there is a condition. The technology can only be operated through the joint effort of humans and Gorn. This revelation sent a ripple of shock through the chamber. Zara and her team exchanged stunned glances, the implications of this requirement sinking in. Before anyone could respond, Zalgoth let out a roar of defiance. Breaking free from Edward's grasp, he lunged towards a nearby control panel. I will not allow this blasphemy, he snarled, his fingers flying over the alien interface. Edward sprang into action, tackling Zalgoth just as the High Priest activated a sequence of commands. The chamber shuddered, and a deep, ominous rumble filled the air. The Guardian's form flickered urgently. Warning, power core overload detected. Catastrophic explosion imminent. This facility and all surrounding areas, including orbiting fleets, will be destroyed if not stopped. Panic swept through the room. Zara rushed to Edward's side, her eyes wide with willpower. We have to stop this, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Edward nodded, a strange calm settling over him as he met Zara's gaze. Without a word, they moved towards the main control interface, their movements perfectly in sync. As their hands touched the alien controls, Edward felt a surge of energy course through him. His mind connected with Zara's, their thoughts intertwining in a way that transcended mere empathy. Together, they navigated the complex alien systems, their shared consciousness, deciphering patterns and solving problems at an astonishing speed. Marcus, Kirazol, and Captain Vexthor watched in amazement as Edward and Zara worked in perfect harmony, their movements fluid and precise. Holographic displays flickered and changed, responding to their touch as if the alien technology was an extension of their own bodies. Power core stabilizing, the Guardian announced after several tense minutes. Threat neutralized. As the facility's systems returned to normal, Edward and Zara slowly separated, both looking dazed by the intensity of their connection. The Guardian's form grew brighter, commanding attention. You have proven yourselves worthy, it declared. The technology of my creators is now available to both humans and Gorn, but only through continued cooperation. This is the key to unlocking the full potential of what we offer. The implications of this offer hung heavy in the air. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had been observing from the sidelines, stepped forward. This changes everything, she said, her mind already racing with possibilities. We need to establish a joint human-Gorn commission immediately to study and implement this technology. As the delegates began to discuss this new development, Edward turned to Zara. The princess met his gaze, a mix of emotions playing across her features. They both knew that their relationship, once considered impossible, had now become a symbol of something much larger than themselves. In that moment, as the future of human-Gorn relations hung in the balance, Edward realized that their journey was far from finished. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril. But as he looked at Zara, he knew that whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. Together. As they stood there, the weight of their shared experience settling over them, Edward felt a subtle shift in the air. The tension that had permeated the alien facility began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. Dr. Elena Rodriguez approached them, her eyes bright with excitement. Edward, Zara, what you've done here is remarkable. This technology, this cooperation between our species, it changes everything. Edward nodded, still processing the implications of their actions. We've opened a door, but there's still a long way to go. Zara placed a hand on his arm, her touch sending a familiar spark through their empathic connection. We'll face it together, she said, her voice firm with purpose. As the group made their way back to the diplomatic compound, Edward couldn't help but notice the changed atmosphere. Humans and Gorn, who had once eyed each other with suspicion, now walked side by side, engaged in animated discussions about the alien technology and its potential applications. Over the next few days, the peace talks progressed with renewed vigor. Edward and Zara found themselves at the center of the negotiations, their unique position as a human-Gorn couple giving them unprecedented insight into both cultures. In a meeting room overlooking the alien amphitheater, Edward leaned over a holographic display, pointing out key details of a proposed cultural exchange program. "If we start with a pilot program on neutral worlds, we can build trust gradually," he explained. Zara nodded, her antenna twitching with excitement. "And we can use the Xel'Naga's telepathic abilities to facilitate communication and understanding between participants." Dr. Rodriguez made notes on her datapad, her fingers flying across the screen. "This is excellent. We'll need to establish clear guidelines for the use of telepathic abilities, of course, but the potential for fostering empathy is enormous." As they worked, a commotion outside caught their attention. Edward moved to the window, his eyes narrowing as he saw a group of protesters gathering at the edge of the compound. Their signs bore slogans denouncing interspecies cooperation and demanding a return to isolation. "Looks like not everyone is on board with our plans," he said, his voice tight. Zara joined him at the window, her expression troubled. "We knew there would be resistance. Change is never easy, especially when it challenges long-held beliefs." Before they could discuss further, Marcus Chen burst into the room, his face flushed with exertion. "Edward, Zara, we've got a situation. We've uncovered a plot to sabotage the peace talks." Edward's body tensed, his gladiatorial instincts kicking in. "What kind of plot?" Marcus handed over a datapad. "A group of extremists, both human and Gorn. They're led by a disgraced Gorn general named Krazathor and a human separatist called Colonel Harker. They see the alien tech as a threat to their species' supremacy." Zara hissed, a sound of pure frustration. "Of course, there are always those who cling to the old ways, even when faced with the promise of a better future." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her work, her face pale. "What are we going to do?" Edward's mind raced, considering their options. "We need to tighten security for one. Marcus, coordinate with Lieutenant Kirazal and Captain Vexthor. I want a full security sweep of the compound and the surrounding area." Zara nodded in agreement. "We should also reach out to the Xel'Naga. Their telepathic abilities could be invaluable in detecting potential threats." As Marcus left to implement their orders, Edward turned back to the window. The protesters outside had grown in number, their chants now audible even through the thick glass. He felt a familiar tension building in his muscles, the same tension he'd felt before stepping into the gladiatorial arena. "We can't let them derail everything we've worked for," he said, his voice low and determined. Zara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "We won't. We've come too far to turn back now." As they stood there, watching the swirling chaos outside, Edward felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. The path to peace was never easy, but with Zara by his side and their growing coalition of allies, he believed they had a fighting chance. Little did they know that at that very moment, in a hidden base on the outskirts of the city, General Krazathor and Colonel Harker were putting the final touches on their plan to seize control of the alien technology. The true test of the fledgling human-Gorn alliance was about to begin. The true test of the fledgling human-Gorn alliance was about to unfold. As the day of the public ceremony approached, Edward and Princess Zara redoubled their efforts to secure the alien facilities. The compound buzzed with activity as they worked closely with Marcus Chen and Lieutenant Kirazal to implement advanced security measures. "The Guardian AI has provided us with some fascinating defensive capabilities," Marcus explained, gesturing to a holographic display of the compound. "We've integrated them into our existing systems, creating a multi-layered security grid." Kirazal's antennae twitched as she studied the display. "The combination of Gorn biosensors and human predictive algorithms is impressive. It should be nearly impossible for anyone to slip through undetected." Edward nodded, his eyes scanning the intricate web of defenses. Let's hope it's enough. The morning of the ceremony arrived, bringing with it a palpable sense of anticipation. Edward adjusted his ceremonial attire, a striking blend of human formal wear and Gorn ceremonial armor. Beside him, Zara looked resplendent in a shimmering gown that incorporated elements from both cultures. As they made their way to the alien amphitheater, Edward felt a ripple of unease through their empathic connection. Zara squeezed his hand, her multifaceted eyes meeting his. "You feel it too?" she asked quietly. Before Edward could respond, a deafening alarm blared throughout the compound. The sound of explosions and weapons fire filled the air as chaos erupted around them. "It's Krasthor and Harker," Marcus's voice crackled over their comm units. "They've breached the outer defenses." Edward's combat instincts kicked in immediately. He scanned the area, quickly assessing the situation. A group of armed extremists was advancing on the amphitheater, their weapons trained on the panicked delegates. Without hesitation, Edward launched into action. He vaulted over a low wall, his gladiatorial training evident in every fluid movement. As he engaged the first attacker, he felt Zara's presence beside him, her movements perfectly synchronized with his own. The delegates watched in awe as the human-Gorn couple fought side by side. Edward's powerful strikes complemented Zara's agile maneuvers, their empathic bond allowing them to anticipate each other's moves with uncanny precision. As they battled the extremists, Edward caught glimpses of the larger conflict unfolding around them. Marcus and Kirazal led a joint human-Gorn security team, fighting their way through the compound to reach the main alien facility. In the sky above, flashes of light signaled the space battle taking place in orbit. Edward and Zara fought their way through waves of attackers, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. As they neared the entrance to the main facility, Edward saw General Krasthor slip inside, a look of fanatical persistence on his face. "Zara, we need to stop him!" Edward called out, deflecting a blast with a piece of fallen debris. The princess nodded, her expression fierce. "The control room, that's where he's headed." They fought their way into the facility, the alien corridors echoing with the sounds of battle. As they approached the control room, they found General Krasthor hunched over a console, his fingers flying over the alien interface. "Step away from the controls, General," Edward commanded, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Krasthor spun around, his eyes wild. "You don't understand. This technology will make the Gorn Empire unstoppable. We can't share it with the humans." Zara stepped forward, her voice filled with a quiet authority. "The time for empires is over, General. We have a chance to build something greater together." As Krasthor lunged for another console, Edward and Zara moved as one. They grappled with the general, their combined strength and coordination proving too much for him. Suddenly, as they struggled with Krasthor, Edward felt a strange sensation. Their empathic connection seemed to expand, encompassing not just each other, but the alien technology around them. The control room came alive, holographic displays flickering to life as hidden panels slid open. The Guardian AI's voice filled the room. "Compatibility confirmed. Activating dormant protocols." The facility began to transform around them. New chambers appeared, filled with technology beyond anything they had seen before. Edward and Zara stood in awe, their hands intertwined as they witnessed the unveiling of the alien's true legacy. Outside, the tide of the battle turned, the advanced defensive systems activated, quickly overwhelming the extremist forces. In orbit, Captain Vexthor's voice came over the comms, reporting the neutralization of the enemy fleet. As the conflict subsided, Edward and Zara emerged from the facility to find a changed landscape. The delegates, having witnessed their bravery and the power of cooperation, gathered around them with newfound respect and admiration. Dr. Rodriguez approached, her eyes wide with excitement. "Edward, Zara, what you've done is incredible. This technology, this cooperation, it's going to change everything." As the implications of their discovery began to sink in, Edward and Zara shared a look. They had faced their greatest challenge yet and emerged victorious. But they both knew that their journey was not nearly finished. The galaxy was entering a new age, and they would be at the forefront, guiding their people toward a future of unity and endless possibility. Possibility. The galaxy was entering a new age, and they would be at the forefront, guiding their people toward a future of unity and endless potential. As the chaos subsided and order was restored to the compound, Edward and Zara found themselves at the epicenter of a galactic transformation. The failed extremist attack had paradoxically strengthened the persistence of those working towards peace. In the days that followed, negotiations intensified, and a groundbreaking peace treaty was ratified, ushering in an era of unprecedented cooperation between humans, Gorn, and Xel'Naga. Edward wiped the sweat from his brow as he exited yet another marathon planning session. "I never thought I'd say this, but I almost miss the simplicity of the gladiatorial arena," he quipped to Zara, who walked beside him. She chuckled, her antennae twitching with amusement. "Don't tell me the great Edward is tired of diplomacy already?" "Never," he replied with a grin. "Just wondering if we could introduce some hand-to-hand combat into the negotiation process. Might speed things up." Their laughter echoed through the corridors of the alien facility, now a hub of interspecies collaboration. Scientists from all three races worked side by side, studying and adapting the ancient technology under the guidance of the Guardian AI. Months flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Edward and Zara found themselves at the heart of every major initiative, from establishing joint research teams to mediating disputes between former adversaries. Their unique bond and shared experiences made them invaluable bridges between cultures. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the sprawling compound, Zara received an unexpected communication. Her multifaceted eyes widened as she read the message on her datapad. "Edward," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "it's from my father." Edward tensed, remembering the Gorn King's initial hostility. "What does he say?" Zara's expression softened as she read aloud. "My daughter, I have watched from afar as you've helped forge a new path for our people. Your courage and wisdom have shown me the error of my past prejudices. I give you my blessing to follow your heart wherever it may lead you, including your relationship with the human, Edward. Your happiness and the future you're building are more important than any outdated traditions." Tears glistened in Zara's eyes as she finished reading. Edward wrapped an arm around her, feeling the mix of emotions flowing through their empathic link. "He's come a long way," Edward murmured. Zara nodded, leaning into his embrace. "We all have." As the one-year anniversary of the peace agreement approached, preparations for a grand celebration were underway. The compound buzzed with activity, representatives from all three species working together to organize an event that would showcase their new unity. On the eve of the celebration, Zara led Edward to the top of one of the alien structures. The sky above was alive with the lights of orbiting ships from various worlds, a testament to the gathering taking place below. Edward gazed in wonder at the view. "It's beautiful," he said. "I never imagined I'd see anything like this when I was fighting in the arena." Zara took his hands in hers, her eyes shimmering with an inner light. "Edward," she began, her voice filled with emotion, "our journey together has been extraordinary. We've faced prejudice, war, and the unknown. Through it all, you've been my strength, my partner, and my love." Edward's heart raced as he realized what was happening. Zara continued, "In my culture, it's traditional for the female to propose. So, Edward, hero of humanity, my gladiator, my heart, will you marry me?" For a moment, Edward was speechless. Then, with a joy that radiated through their empathic bond, he pulled Zara close. "Yes," he whispered, 1,000 times. "Yes." Their kiss was illuminated by the starlight above and the glow of the alien technology below. As they embraced, neither of them noticed the subtle shift in the structure beneath their feet, as if the very planet was responding to their union. News of their engagement spread rapidly, capturing the imagination of billions across the galaxy. The story of the human gladiator and the Gorn princess, once a scandal, had become a symbol of hope and unity for a new age. As Edward and Zara descended from the alien structure, hand in hand, they were met by a crowd of cheering well-wishers. Humans, Gorn, and Xel'Naga alike offered their congratulations. Many moved to tears by the significance of the moment. Dr. Rodriguez pushed her way through the crowd, beaming with pride. "I always knew you two were destined for greatness," she said, embracing them both. But this is beyond even my wildest dreams. Marcus Chen approached, a rare smile on his usually serious face. Congratulations, he said, clasping Edward's shoulder. Though I hope you realize this means even more security headaches for me. As the impromptu celebration continued around them, Edward and Zara shared a quiet moment. You know, Edward said, his eyes twinkling, planning this wedding might be our biggest diplomatic challenge yet. Zara laughed, the sound like music to Edward's ears. I think we're up to the task, she replied. After all, we've already changed the galaxy. How hard can planning a wedding be? Little did they know that their union would set in motion events that would unlock the full potential of the alien legacy, forever altering the course of galactic history. But for now, they were content to bask in the joy of the moment, surrounded by the love and support of their new, united galactic family.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.